And welcome to a brand new part of the Alex Cuesta show that I'm hoping to be able to do on a daily basis. It is going to be called the Alex Cuesta Daily Show. I know, big variation there. But what the goal is here is to talk about articles, segments on TV, things that I have seen, and kind of break them down on a daily basis. Some things that I think are important, some things that I just kind of want to talk about and I want to bring up. So I'm hoping that it's something that can become a daily thing that I can start to release. I'm still going to do my main show, the Alex Cuesta Show, and it's going to be with David still, and that's still going to be its topical self. But this is going to be something a little different. This is going to be more of actually grabbing the articles, actually playing some of the segments and doing those sort of things and making it more of a typical, I guess, political talk show. In that way, one of the way the political shows are done nowadays. But this one's just with the focus of not talking about so many different subjects and making a big, long show out of it. Just kind of breaking it down, taking one, putting it out there, putting my opinions out there on it, and really exposing some of the shit that goes on and some of the things that I see. So we're going to start today off with the doozy. We're going to start off with the New York Times article written by Dana Goldstein and Noam Scheiber. And the title of it is, "As more teachers unions push for remote schooling, parents worry, so do Democrats." Now, right there, right from the title, you're seeing that as much as they mention parents worrying, but they kind of give away what's happening here. They mention Democrats are also worried about it. They talk about teachers unions doing something that sets up what this whole article is kind of going to be. As we read on, we're going to see that this New York Times article mentions parents in there to try, I guess, to get people to believe that this has something to do with them sympathizing with parents and their wants and needs. But as you read it and you look at it, it really is more of a call and a plea to Democrats to do something about these unions and kind of a slap on the wrist to unions to work with the Democrats to try and back off and let these Democrats do what they need to do to get elected. Because the New York Times, places like them, CNN, Washington Post, a lot of these places, MSNBC, are very worried about the upcoming 2022 elections and the 2024 presidential election. And you see it. They mention what happened in Virginia here in this article. And we'll get to that point. But the basis is, the end game here is that what they're trying to do is essentially this New York Times article. As I read it and I go through it, we're going to see that it is more of talking about the unions and kind of in a rare time, people on the left going at more people on the left in order to accomplish more politically. So let's go ahead with this article. Again, as more teachers push for remote schooling, parents worry, so do Democrats. New York Times article. So it starts off, the big headline of it, what they start off saying: Chicago teachers, as of today, January 2022, voted to go all remote again. Their third largest school system in the country, and the union members are refusing to work in person, arguing that classrooms are unsafe amid the Omicron surge. Now, let I remind you that any normal person and a lot of people that are walking around have acknowledged that Omicron is not half as bad in terms of what we've seen, in terms of deaths, in terms of severe illness, as what Delta was. And even what the Beta and Alpha was, the Chinese start, the UK variant that eventually came to the United States. It is not a secret that Omicron isn't as bad. So that's your first thing that you're seeing here, is that the teachers are trying to make this big deal out of something that is knowingly not as bad as what it has been. So we continue to go with that. A lot of the teachers unions at the local level are starting again to ramp up. It's not just Chicago, at least ramp up negotiations about returning to school in person again or going remote after this holiday just occurred. Now, one thing that is absolutely insane is that we've had these kids back in school and they went through such a long time of having to be out of school. And now they're talking about pulling these kids back out. The Unions are citing understaffing because of illness, shortages of rapid tests, medical grade masks. And there's teachers that are planning sick outs. Now, I need to say this. If you're a teacher that's listening to this and you are planning one or participating in a sick out after everything that we just went through, after everything these kids just went through, you don't give a shit about the kids. You don't. You can't. You can't. Because the bottom line is, if you look at it, there's pieces. There's another piece by New York Times back in January 24th of 2021, saying about the suicide rates that we knew then of students. This one specifically talks about the Las Vegas, where a student took their own lives. And this is not just one. It's going on in places like Arizona, and it's going on nationwide now. We've seen suicide, depression, anxiety rates damn near triple amongst ages 0 to 17. School age, I guess. We're talking about 5 to 17, something like that. And it's ridiculous that if you're a teacher and you have seen or heard this, it is definitely correlating with the fact that kids aren't in person in school learning. They aren't in school interacting with their friends. They aren't in school going to that sporting event. They aren't in school going to that extracurricular activity, that club. Because when you're an adolescent, when you're in middle school, high school, seeing your friends is everything. Participating in something you care passionately about is everything. I think a lot of people forget what it was like to be a kid. When that pimple that only you notice is going to end your fucking day, end your world. Everyone's going to notice it. Or whether you get a crease in your pants or someone scuffed your shoes on the way to school, or you scuffed your brand new shoes. These little minute things that as adults don't affect us as much turn a whole adolescence world upside down in middle school and high school. So just imagine what's happening to these kids that had to go through this long layoff, that probably suffered some sort of depression, that are going to have some effects for a long time. I don't care what type of person they are. If you're a kid, you're not equipped to handle this yet. And now they're back in school. We've had sports going again. Again, it's been different. Don't get me wrong. We're still making kids wear masks like idiots, even though we know non-fit tested masks, cloth masks, all these masks don't do anything. There's holes in them. But they're at least back. They can at least talk to their friends. They can at least do their sports. They can go to their after-school clubs. They can continue to put on plays. They can talk to counselors that they've talked to and created relationships for years and go back for help if they need it. And now we're going to rip that all away from these kids again. Just think about that. Think about that before you plan a sick out. But we're going to continue with this article. Milwaukee has schools that are remote until January 18th because of staffing issues. But in the teachers union, Amy Mizilako doubts the situation will significantly improve and worries that the school board will resist extending online classes. I anticipate it'll be a fight, she said. Now, I'm kind of reading verbatim at times, and I'm going to paraphrase at times, but it's just to kind of give you where the unions stand on this. And I get it. I'm in a labor union. Unions are supposed to be there to protect their workers. That is their one and main goal, protect their workers. But at the same time, I feel like we need to hold teachers unions to a different level, because the workers that they are working, that they're protecting, also are the ones that affect our youth, that affect our future, that affect some of the most vulnerable and fragile individuals in the world, in this country especially. So they need to be held to a different standard. That this individual, Ms. Mizilako, goes on to say, I think that Joe Biden, Miguel Cardona, and the newly elected mayor of New York City, or Lori Lightfoot, they can all declare that schools will be open, but unless they have hundreds of thousands of people to step in for educators who are sick in this uncontrolled surge, they won't be. That's a threat. If I've ever heard one, that is an absolute threat. That, yeah, these people could say what they want, but we, the union, ultimately get to say in the end. And the more I read quotes from some of these people that are union presidents and things like that, you're going to get to grasp and you're going to get to see that more and more, This seems to be more about a fight for control. Seems to be more about a fight for the unions to not give up the control that they have had. And for some teachers who are strongly firm in it, that have had their little tissy fits that have gotten them a long way, to not give up that control as well. Now, like anything else, if a teacher wants to wear a mask 24/7, so be it. Wear your mask. If you want to get as many boosters as you want, go for it. Have a great time. But you should not have the power, and a small handful of you should not have the power to close the school down when so many kids need to be there. So let's continue a little with the article here. Because they have close ties to the unions, Democrats are concerned that additional closures like those in Chicago could lead to a possible replay of the party's recent loss in the Virginia governor race. Polling showed that school disruptions were an important issue for swing voters who broke Republican, particularly suburban white women. So there you go. We get not too far down in the article, we get to the crux of it right there. Unions are screwing up Democrats' chances by not going with them. And Democrats are concerned. They don't want another Virginia loss. They don't want that to happen. Even though it's already predicted that it seems like Republicans are going to do very well in 2022, this is a main reason. And the unions doing this now are only going to hurt Democrats even worse. So there it is. This is what the New York Times article is about. It's not about parents being concerned. It's not about kids and their well-being. It is about Democrats in the union need to get along so we can win votes. We can win things. In here, they have an individual named Brian Stryker. He is the partner in polling at ALG Research who worked in Virginia. He said it's a big deal in most state polling that they do, and that school closures hurt Democrats. Anyone who thinks there's a political problem that stops at the city of Chicago line is kidding themselves. This is going to resonate across Illinois and across the country. So again, the article here that I'm talking about, where again, they mention parents, has nothing to do with it. And it's a pretty heartless article, to be quite honest. They barely mention the actual well-being of the kids. They barely mention, they don't mention the economic impact that lockdowns have on parents of kids in school. They don't give a shit about that at all. They don't care. They don't care at all. Let's see. What else do they have here? So the article does mention at some point that most kids have vaccination. 90% of kids, I think, or something, it's up at close to 90% of kids have the vaccinations. And we have a lot more knowledge about this virus, and especially the Omicron variant, how it's working right now, than we did at so many other phases. So it's bizarre. It's bizarre to see the unions continuing to go. But again, the more you read about it, the more you see this is all about power. This becomes about power. As you continue to scroll, as I continue to look through this article, we get to Newark schools. And here's an interesting quote. And this quote to me was absolutely huge. And it says, it kind of gives away the game in terms of unions wanting power and how they feel about the parents, the kids, anything, how much they don't care. So the Newark Teachers Union president, John Abijan, I might be butchering your name. I apologize if I am. But he said he's hopeful about the return to buildings and that he remained unsure if every school could operate safely. Student vaccination is far from universal, and most parents have not consented to their children taking regular virus tests. So we're not going to consent to you shoving things into our kids every single week to test for a virus that isn't going to probably kill them or really affect them too much. So yeah, I wouldn't want my kid doing that either. So he said that if tests remain scarce, he might ask remote learning at specific schools with low vaccination rates and high case counts. He agreed that online learning was a burden to working parents, but argued that educators should not be sacrificed for the good of the economy. So don't sacrifice educators for the good of the economy, but sacrifice children and their well-being for your teachers. Think about what this man is saying. These educators are more important than your kids. That's exactly what he's saying. He has a quote here, and this quote says everything. I'd see the entire city of Newark unemployed before I allowed one single teacher's aide to die needlessly. So he doesn't care. He doesn't care that the unemployment of others is probably going to have a more adverse effect than a sick or even a, God forbid, dead teacher's aide on the whole economy. He doesn't care that it's creating poverty, that it's creating hunger, that it's creating homelessness, that it is causing so much strife that there will be a bigger death count on the unemployment that we have seen attributed to that than we'll have on Omicron and what's going on right now. He does not care. And a lot of these union reps do not care. It is a power grab for the unions. It is one way for them to puff their chest out because they are always strong arming. Their union, the nurses union, a lot of unions are always trying to strong arm, and they're some of the biggest lobbyists in Washington. So don't think that they're not political. These unions are more political than they are about the actual fields that they're supposed to be representing. So don't get that twisted. But that man, John Abayon, I don't know how to say your name, he just gave away the game with that quote. So we go on. They talk a little bit about LA and that they're working. Vaccination rate, this is where I got this number from. Vaccination rate for students 12 and older is about 90%, with student vaccine mandates set to kick in the fall. So they're about to have a mandate, and they're going to all be tested weekly. That could cause some controversy, but it is LA. So LA may be okay with it. But again, in LA, 90% of the students 12 and older have a vaccination. Can't imagine that number is too different in Chicago. Not going to lie. It's another giant liberal run city. So I don't think it's going to be too much of a difference there. Now, New York Times article has to mention that this is not limited to liberal states. Kentucky Teachers Union at one of the largest school districts has said the flexibility to go remote amid escalating infection rates. They want to keep that. But the evil Republican-controlled state legislature has granted no more than 10 days for such instruction district-wide, and unions there worry that may be inadequate. Jenny Ward Belander, a leader in a statewide union, said that teachers may have to walk off the job. Now, stop here. Stop right here. Jenny Ward Belander, you're an idiot. And anyone there that does not like what Kentucky did is stupid. They cannot be closed for more than 10 days. What was the CDC guideline before a few days ago? It's now 5 days, but it was a 10-day quarantine. That number makes complete and total sense. You find a case, a kid needs to go home, or a teacher, somebody in the school needs to go home. You take a 10-day respite, which is supposed to be the quarantine, and then that's it. And if on individual cases, another person gets it while they're sitting home for 10 days, obviously they're going to tell them to stay home longer. But there is nothing wrong with Kentucky's rule for 10 days. There's no reason to be gone more than 10 days from the school. It's still going to disrupt a lot of things. It's still going to suck, but it's better than making them go all remote for whatever time you deem as worthy, teachers unions. This Miss Ward Belander continues and says, frustration is building on teachers. I'd hate to say we'd walk out at that point, but it's absolutely possible. So we are a bunch of children, is what this woman just said. We don't care about, and you know what? Bottom line, this woman knows what's going on with kids nationwide and probably in her area with depression, anxiety, with suicide rates going up. And they'll say things like, oh, political turmoil and, inequalities and inequities are a big burden on our kids today. No, it's not. Kids are still kids. They might talk big, but in the end, they don't give a shit about any of that stuff at the high school level, middle school level. Some do. Most don't. Most say it because someone with passion says it and they want to be cool with their friend group, so they say it too. They don't really give a shit about that stuff. Again, remember what it was like to be in high school. Everyone just wanted to kind of get with it and be a part of the group and all that fun stuff. Most people are followers, especially in high school. It's a very awkward time. So if you're willing to walk out on these kids again and leave them alone again, rip everything away from them again. What is wrong with you people? How selfish can you possibly be, especially with Omicron? Especially with Omicron. Apparently, it's like 95% of the cases that they found now is Omicron. Are you serious? Get back to work. Get back to work. So they mentioned that that the federal is more willing to work with the bigger areas of what we want to do in terms of staying open, and that they're close allies of the president. But again, this New York Times article gives away the game. And over the last decade, some locals, they read here, some locals, including those in Los Angeles and Chicago, were taken over by activist leaders whose tactics can be more aggressive than the national leaders like Randy Weingarten of the American Federation of Teachers and Becky Pringle of the National Education Association, both close allies of President Biden. Let me read that again, the beginning, or just this one part. Over the last decade, some locals, including LA and Chicago, were taken over by activist leaders. They're not educators. They don't care about educating kids. They don't care about kids. They're activists. They want to push through what they want to push through. They want to create activists. They don't give a shit about your kids and their learning and their well-being. We need to learn this now. Your local school, local board, education board may not be your friend. Your local education union may not be your friend. Start looking into them. Start looking into who these people are. Start looking into their backgrounds. Start doing it all. Look into them. If they are an activist, I know people are tired of hearing about critical race theory, but look into it because that's exactly what these people are. People that preach critical race theory are activists. They're not educators. People that preach equity, activists, not educators. People that preach diversity, inclusion, equity. They are activists. They are not educators. Get them out of schools. We don't need activists. They gave away the game right there in this article. Activists are taking over and infiltrating. And people listening to me going might be like, Alex, you're crazy. I live in a small town. Certainly, they don't care here. No, they're everywhere. Go look at your code of conduct. Look at certain things that they put in. No one pays attention. Pay attention. If you see those buzzwords, diversity, inclusion, equity, if you see those types of things, perk your ears up to it. That means there's an activist there making some rules. Get them out. Get them out. So this article concludes. It goes through a few more things, talking about other areas where large districts and kind of the battle between the unions and more Democrats and what they're having with the constituents. And most people want their kids back in school. Most parents can't afford to be home again. They need their kids to go back to school. They need to go to work. They can't stay home. So it's interesting with the rest of it. It's kind of a lot of the same stuff. They're just giving more examples of unions want to do this. People don't want to do this. Politicians are in crosshairs, yada, 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 all that stuff. It's an interesting article to say, but again, it's all about it's kind of a slap on the wrist for unions from the New York Times. And letting Democrats know that they need to start doing something now about these union leaders, need to get in their ears, need to talk to them, get them to change their tune. Because the last thing Democrats need is to have unions that they support heavily and that they get a ton of money from coming out and contradicting them and saying, yeah, you want schools to stay open, kick rocks. That is essentially what this article is saying. Again, I'll read the last paragraph of this article. Or let me see. What do I have here? The last two paragraphs I'll read. And again, it kind of gives away the game where the unions want power. And this is a warning for Democrats. They need to get the unions in or they will lose again. And if it turns out that Democratic candidates pay a political price for unions' assertiveness, local labor officials do not consider it to be among their top concerns. If periods of remote learning this winter hurt the Democrat Party, quote, That's a question for the consultants and the brand trust to figure out, unquote. Mr. Abajian, the Newark Union president. But that it's the right thing to do. There's no question in my mind. So let's talk about the right thing to do here with this guy and with all these union people and teachers. Let's talk about the numbers that matter. And we're all about numbers here, right? All we saw was the death count during the Trump years. We saw it beginning during the Biden, but as Biden doubled the death count in a shorter amount of time with more ability to stop it with treatments and vaccines, they kind of stopped paying attention to that. But we're not going to really, no, don't. Biden's plan is working. He's beating the coronavirus and he's also curing cancer, which he promised to do twice. But let's just look at some numbers from the CDC. Number of cases from ages 0 to 17, 7,290,065. Now, this is as of the 6th, I believe, when I looked at the data set. That's out of 45,700,683 cases. That's 1.6% of total cases. So not a lot. Their case number is not a lot. Oh, again, and it also mentioned in the article that transmission from kids in schools has not been an issue around the world. So again, not an issue, this number. Let's think about deaths, 0 to 17. Let's look at that. Again, tragic, obviously, but kids die all the time from a lot of things and it sucks every single time. 694 deaths. This is from the beginning of the pandemic where they were taking data. Beginning 2 years ago. 694 deaths, 0 to 17. Out of the 825,083 total deaths. This is as of the 6th. That is 0.084% of deaths. And now when you look at the death rate of 0 to 17 of people that get, of that kids from that rate to get the coronavirus and die, it is 0.00095% of kids that get coronavirus from the ages of 0 to 17, school-age kids, die. And we are making these kids stay home. We are talking about doing it again. Think about that insanity. Those are numbers from the CDC. The last number, I did the math on my own. I guess it's not a CDC number. I did numbers. I did math. But think about that. They want to keep kids home. These unions are saying we need to keep kids home. It's not safe. Everyone might die. Very low transmission from kids to teachers. We have vaccines. We have treatments. We know a lot more about it. Omicron isn't as deadly. Yes, it spreads, but you don't need to keep anybody home. And keeping kids home, unions fighting to go back to remote, has nothing to do with their safety. It has nothing to do with your kids' safety. It has everything to do with the unions having power. They had a lot of it during the pandemic. They want to keep it. They don't want to let it go. And they're going to do what they can while this pandemic is going on to continue to use it. Democrats be damned, apparently. And that's what this New York Times article is saying. It is saying, Democrats, you need to reel the unions in or we're going to lose again. And I say we're because the New York Times is a cheerleading arm of the Democrat Party. So that's the crux of this article. And the end game is no kid should be home from school ever again. Not during this pandemic, at least. Not the way it's going on right now with Omicron. It shouldn't even be a question. And anyone that does a sick out, any teacher that does a walkout should be fired. You should be fired, tenure or not, because you don't care about the kids. Period. So that was the Alex Quest The Daily Show first episode. Hope everybody enjoyed it. If you want to find us on social media or find the show on social media, again, I'm going to continue with the tradition from the Alex Quest Show. You're not getting any of them. Search the Alex Quest Show on any of your favorite social media area. You should find it and it'll be there. And you can access to a bunch of our other shows that we did already. I think we have 10 in the books already, the weekly ones, but hopefully this is going to be a lot more of these. So again, I want to thank everybody so much for listening to the Alex Quest The Daily Show. Everyone, hopefully see you tomorrow.